Hello, hello. How are you doing today? I have a special guest, and this guest today reminds me a lot of what used to happen to me for years. And for years and years, I suffered from headaches that would just like take me down, debilitating, couldn't think, it's just the kind of headaches that just stop you in your tracks for days and days. And when I heard that Dr. Meg Mill was interested in coming on and chatting with us about headaches, I was super interested. So even if you don't have like consistent crazy headaches, Dr. Mill is going to talk about not just headaches, but the whole body, functional medicine, and how it all comes together. And I think you're going to find this very, very interesting. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. So, do you mind just telling us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what functional medicine is?
Sure. Yes. So I'm Dr. Meg Mill and I have a virtual functional medicine practice. So I see people all over the world. And what we do in functional medicine is we really look into the root cause and we look at connections. I almost say sometimes to people, it's like we're becoming detectives of their bodies because we're really connecting all the dots and looking at you as a whole person and looking at your symptoms and how each thing that's happening to you is often connected. And I think in conventional medicine, we often put things into buckets more like, okay, we're going to look at the GI system. We're going to look at hormones. We're going to look at headache, like neurology and all of these different things. And then they're not always communicating and connecting with each other. So what we're trying to do is make all those connections, look at you as a whole person, and then really looking once we find that root cause of restoring balance and your natural ability to heal.
See, I love that actually about functional medicine because it's so true. You go to a doctor and it's one thing and one thing only. When we're actually all the things, right? And it is all connected. It's like it's the hip bone's connected to the leg bone, right? But it
Absolutely.
doesn't seem like that's normally how it happens. So I really appreciate you being here to talk with us today. So before we dive into headaches, can we talk just briefly about, well, let me ask you if this plays into the role, briefly about hormones, because I have a feeling that hormones also play a part of this, but that also it's one of those things where um, we're thinking about it. Like women start thinking about hormones and they start thinking about it, whether they're 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or whatever, they're affected in different ways. So can you just like touch on just a tad bit? And then I really want to dive into the headaches.
Sure. And you're correct. So one of the things even with headaches is the hormonal component because many people with headaches have those cyclical headaches that are hormone related. But what we're not noticing that we're actually, can I cut that? I'm sorry.
Oh, absolutely.
That my
Absolutely.
computer dinged and I'm not sure why. Can you hear the ding?
That's okay. I heard the ding, but it's not a big deal. But Brad, go ahead and cut that. And then just, yeah, do whatever you'd like to do. And then we'll start over.
It just, I didn't want that to be disruptive and I'm not sure
Okay.
why it came up, but something happened. There was a notification. I thought, oh no, I don't want you to have
Not a
your,
problem. Not a
okay. So
problem.
we'll start at, you asked me about hormones. So, okay. So, I'm going to just start there. So, um, hormones are a role actually in headaches too. So that is one of the components that we'll look into when we're talking about headaches, particularly for people that are getting those cyclical headaches that are either an ovulation or before they start their period. But we are starting that conversation more, which is great, about hormones in general and how they do affect. And we're all going to go through changes in our hormones. So I like to say it's really not a condition, it's just natural, but we do
Mhm.
experience symptoms because of the natural change in our hormones through our life that can be uncomfortable, and that once we can really dial in and manage them, we can really make a change and feel so much better in all of these processes as we go through life. Now, I think something that happens that people aren't aware of is that actually when you're looking at like a perimenopause menopause state, hormones start to change sometimes earlier than we even are expecting them to. So just being aware of how you're feeling, of your progesterone can drop earlier than your estrogen, which can potentially make you estrogen dominant for a longer time than you think until estrogen sort of wears out through menopause. So I think just being in tune with your body and recognizing that there's so many things you can do to help balance hormones.
And you actually do hormonal testing, don't you?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And just for everybody listening, we will link to Dr. Meg's site and all the notes in the show, everything in the show notes. So you'll be fine. And sorry, I just called you Dr. Meg because that's what I
That's
call
great.
my doctor.
Yes.
So yes. So let's talk about headaches for just a minute. Um, so why are you really passionate about working with headaches and people
Well,
who are
what
dealing with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I opened my functional medicine practice, I started noticing a commonality, particularly among women. So whenever we're in functional medicine, I'm dealing with all sorts of different health issues. But whenever people were coming to me, I do a really detailed intake questionnaire and symptom questionnaire the first time we meet. And whether someone was coming to me because they had headaches or for another reason, I just kept seeing this pattern of so many women suffering from headaches long term. And they would say just almost normalize it, let feel that,
Mhm.
okay, I just have
Yeah.
headaches, it's just a part of my life, I'm taking medication for them when they have pain. And it could also have been leading to other health issues. So once we started working together, then they were starting to say, oh my gosh, I don't have I can't even, I couldn't even imagine this, my headaches are gone, I no longer suffer. And I just started to realize that this is something that's so common and really not talked about a lot. Like we're starting to talk about hormones more, we're starting to talk about gut health more, but people are just being told they have to suffer with headaches. And so I became passionate to let people know that this isn't something that you have to suffer. There's so many things we can do to eliminate the headaches.
And I mean, as someone who, like, I have been very fortunate. I suffered for years, never being able to figure out what was going on. This was, oh gosh, this is probably 20 years ago now. And and I just eventually outgrew them. I don't know what happened. Maybe a hormone change. I don't know what happened. Eventually I got past it. But it was actually a part of who I was at the time, which is crazy to think about it. But, I was someone who just lived with headaches. And so I was always in pain. And to know that you can change that and change it consistently is really empowering,
Absolutely.
you know? And so back in the day when I had headaches all the time, I never really found anything that worked. But do you have like conventional things that you talk to people about using for their headaches, or how do you normally approach it?
So we sort of flip the model upside down when we're talking about headaches. So conventionally, what you're going to usually have is medication to treat your pain. So you have the headaches; they're just covering it up. Where when I work with people with headaches, we're trying to find the root cause. So we're actually looking for what's causing the headache, and we're trying to eliminate the headache rather than having to treat the pain. So we look at things in their life like all sorts of different things and connecting the dots. We're going to look at food, we're going to look at sleep, we're going to look at stress, we're going to look at hormones, your underlying gut issues, and piece those all together. And when we can make all those connections about what's actually creating that symptom of having a headache, we can get the headaches to go away without having to take the medication. So it's just a different model really that we're trying to do to eliminate the headaches rather than treat the pain of them.
And that comes right back to what you said in the very beginning, which is, dealing with people as a whole instead of like a certain thing. Because I did, like at the time, I did go to a doctor, and basically they gave me, I don't even remember, like all the medication and the stuff that you shouldn't be taking, right? Like that, whenever it was, I don't think it was that unusual to give somebody, I don't remember what it was, but some sort of really serious pain pill and go, here, just take this. And so the idea of actually treating it as something that's a whole makes so much more sense to me. so much so much more sense than just taking another prescription, right? So you mentioned several things, but one of the things you mentioned was diet. How does diet play such a big role in headaches?
So we know that there are different foods that we know from studies that can trigger headaches for various functional reasons in your body. So we want to look first at food groups, and we look at groups like tyramine containing foods. Caffeine. Caffeine's tricky because sometimes people are even taking medication to treat headaches with caffeine. But if you have a withdrawal, you can actually get a rebound from from the caffeine withdrawal can cause the headache too. And then we look at like MSG, foods with salicylates, histamine foods. And so there's these food groups that we know potentially can trigger headaches for various reasons. Now, the tricky part for people with headaches are that not every one of these foods cause headaches for every person. And so it's really about getting to know your particular triggers because and almost the threshold of when you're triggered. So I'm going to use the example of wine because people will often say, "Oh, I had a glass of wine and I didn't have a headache, but then I had another time I did and I did, so must not be the wine." And that's not necessarily the case because sometimes if you drank wine with another tyramine containing food like an aged cheese, you can put yourself at a threshold where you're actually getting the headache from the combination of foods. And so really dialing into what I like to have people do that that the listeners can do in a simple step is actually print out a calendar and then you write down the foods that you ate the day you had the headache and the day before, and because we can have delayed food reactions up to 48 hours after. And so that way you're getting an idea of the connection of some foods. And once you start to see that pattern, you may even be able to start to see like, okay, every time I have citrus containing foods, I end up with a headache. And we're not even thinking when you're eating that citrus food that it's a good food for you. There's a lot of nutrient values, but that might be triggering your headache. Um, and then there's another additional component with when it comes to food sensitivities, and that's individual. So when you're having food sensitivities, you're getting an immune response to foods that your body is sensitive to. So we dial into individual food sensitivities too. So it can feel like when I'm working with people, it can feel like a lot at first to get comfortable with understanding it, and then once you do, it happens quickly. We look at these foods, I say don't eliminate them all, and maybe you do it for a short period of time and then put them back in so you get an idea of which foods are triggering you. But once you can dial into which food you're getting triggered from, it can really make such a difference for people.
Yeah. No, that's such a good point. I mean, I know like for myself, because I can only speak for myself, I will get headaches from chocolate.
Mhm.
End of story, chocolate makes me sick. So I just, it's one of those things that eventually I figured it out because I don't eat it enough or I don't eat it so much that it was a consistent, but eating just a little bit and boom, headache. So you're right though. It's all of us are so different.
Mhm.
And it's so intriguing to me how just I don't know, like you're the specialist, the one, how each of us just works individually in a different way. And it can't just all be put in the same bucket. So
Exactly.
a question. So what do you like? We started to talk about hormones earlier, but I guess they're like hormonal headaches. So how do you know when you're having that? And what do you do for people who that's where they're at? They're having a hormonal headache more than anything.
Yes. So generally, the most common reasons for hormonal headaches are estrogen dominance or a rapid change in estrogen. And so typically, now that everybody's like we're saying, everyone's different. So we're really dialing into each unique person. But the typical pattern for that is to know if you have a headache at ovulation or if you're getting the headaches right before or right around the start of your period. So we see women often that will say, "Oh, every month I know I'm going to get the headache when I ovulate, or every month I get the headache right before my period." And that's typically hormonal related. And so that would be right before your period because your progesterone may be dropping faster than your estrogen, leaving you in that estrogen dominant place. And sometimes for people during perimenopause, it can get worse because your ovaries are trying to still make estrogen. They're still, and sometimes we can get this up and down of estrogen where they're just still trying to work hard, and you get more bursts in some ways. It can be a little bit more erratic. And so really working on things that help with estrogen dominance can be a great first step. So besides the fact that our body makes estrogen and there are reasons why we can have more or less estrogen in our body, we're also exposed to a lot of estrogens around us that we're not considering. And so really, like, something you can just do is take a look at your environment and really make sure you're eating grass-fed, hormone-free meat and dairy so
Mm,
that you're not getting any extra hormones in your food. Things like BPA and plastics, and just switching to glass containers. Particularly, people will heat the plastics, and once we heat that BPA, it can make the molecules change and leach more into our food. So really just not, switching over like to glass is a way to get those down. Looking at your personal care products, I tell people just to replace. It can be expensive to go in and replace all your personal care products, but our skin is like a giant mouth. So I say, look at what you're using. We have a lot of
right,
hidden products, and so we
right.
can replace them one at a time. So each time you're done with a bottle, get something that's more natural. You can go to the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, and they have that's a great website to know if products are clean. It's a great reference.
That is a great site. EWG, right?
Hmm.
I'm gonna link to that in the show notes because you're right, I had completely forgotten about that, but it's a great site to let you know what is in your products. So
Yes, you can put your
it's
product in, it will give it a rating. So then like,
yeah.
okay, you know what? Should I be considering something that has less chemicals that could have, they're called xenoestrogens that are in these products, and we can be bombarded by them in different ways and that we're not even aware of. So once we clean up our environment, each step we take can, now we can dig further. Like you were saying, I do hormone testing. And so hormones are all about balance. So what we're really doing is looking at all of your hormones, how they're in relation to each other, how they're metabolized, all of those. And then we can do that and actually really dial in and balance. But making those changes is a great first step.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we're gonna have you back and talk about hormones too, because it's such a huge thing. Like,
Mhm.
people a lot of times think that hormones are something that happen to you, and then you get to menopause and you're done. And not so.
No. Yes.
Oh, so there's another thing that comes up in headaches, and I'm pretty sure that for me, this was one of the triggers for my headaches in the past is stress. Are you seeing more people with headaches now after this whole pandemic situation, or is it just still the same? And are you seeing a lot more clients with stress, and how does it affect your headaches?
Well, I think yes, I think everybody has a high stress load. It's been a crazy last few years, and so when it comes to headache, stress affects everything. So it's like when you're looking at every different aspect, you want to look at people's stress levels and how that's contributing. But what even gets more complicated is there are different types of stress, and stress can, in addition to being our emotional stress, it can also be biological too. So the
Mm,
pain from a headache can also cause stress on the body, which
right.
can increase your prolactin levels, which can increase your pain sensitivity, which can, increase your stress. And so we can get in
Right,
what
so it's a
I like to call,
cycle.
yes, this chain
Yeah.
of pain. And so you are in this cycle of stress that's causing more stress and so what we really need to do is work on bringing your body back into what we call the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's where we rest and digest. So our sympathetic nervous system is our fight and flight, where we're stressed, we're ready to run, and biologically it's doing things like sending blood to our limbs and all these various functions in our body, and we want to work on bringing ourselves back to that place where we can rest and digest. So I really do think, like, I say even take a few minutes a day and practice deep breathing. We know we can use our breath to bring us back into the parasympathetic nervous system, or really what resonates with you. I think it's different for everyone. I can say to someone, okay, you need to do this, and you need to meditate, do gratitude journaling, and be in nature, and that may work for someone, but it might not be the way that someone else manages their stress or de-stress. So
Right.
it's individual. And so finding what resonates with you and just doing something that brings you back into that calm place every day is really important.
Okay. So here's a question about that. Bringing you back to that calm place every day, is it like something that you do, it's one and done? Or is it when people hit like a stress level, do they need to do it again? Like, what is your recommendation?
So that's a good question. So what I tell people actually is so if we're working on something like deep breathing exercises, I actually say that I want you to practice this so that when you're stressed, you have this tool to use to bring yourself back into that calm place. Because you're right, you're not, you're practicing your deep breathing or your meditation or something, and you're zen, you feel very good, and then something happens and the stress level goes up. But when we practice those methods, we build that tool to be able to use those methods to bring ourselves back to a calm place when we reach that stress point.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And it's like, I'm thinking, what do you, when you work with clients, do you have, let me give you an example. So I'm a meditator. I'm pretty zen. I get in the car, I get in the traffic in Houston, Texas, I turn into an animal. Like, I'm a completely different and not a nice animal. So, I have learned over the years to when I get to that place, start, either breathing, or if I'm really sitting in traffic, I can close my eyes for a couple of minutes, whatever it is. But it's been a long-term process for me to learn on my own how to notice when I'm getting triggered so that I start using the things that I know to use. So, do you have a way to suggest to your clients even before they get there? Like, is there a suggestion? Does that make sense? Like, to me, it's
Yeah, no,
like,
I agree. Like, you're
yeah,
recognizing that the traffic is a trigger for you. And so, like,
yeah,
I guess what you start to realize is that your thoughts, what you're thinking, they're just thoughts. So, whether you're sitting in traffic and you're thinking, I'm going to be late, this is terrible, I'm wasting my time here. Or you're sitting there thinking like, oh, I'm just relaxing in my car and here I am. It doesn't change your situation. It just affects the way you're feeling. So I think recognizing in meditation helps with this, because we recognize in meditation that we recognize thoughts and we're able to push our thoughts away. So really recognizing that those are thoughts, and then think, these are recognizing that those are just thoughts and that you can change them. So they're not in control of you, you're in control of them. And so you have the power to change those at any point and bring yourself back into a calm place.
So you would say, like, in functional medicine, then it's not just the body, but it's also the body, the mind, the soul, bringing it all together and teaching people to really be cognizant of it.
Absolutely. We're all connected.
Yeah, we are, right?
Yes.
Every bit.
Mhm.
So let me, real quick, you have before we sign off, I'm not getting rid of you yet, but you have a gift for the listeners today. And it was 7 steps to getting rid of headaches,
There's
or
8 in there, but yes.
8
So
in
I
there.
have 8 steps to end headaches naturally. And it's a great guide to get started, to, look through and see things that you can do right now just to get started to start ending your headaches. And you can go to, it's www.helpmyheadaches.com to get that
Nice.
guide, and you can download that guide, and yeah, and start today. There's just a lot of things that we can do and have the power to in our own life, to recognize that it's just not, I just want to get the word out that it's just not something that you have to live with.
You don't have to do what I did, right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, you don't have to, years. So it's helpmyheadache.com. We will absolutely link to it in the show notes, of course. But in case you're driving and listening, that one's pretty easy, helpmyheadache.com. And is there anything else that you'd like to share before we sign off today?
So I have a program that's specifically geared towards headaches. So, and eliminating headaches and living without them. And I run that live a few times a year. I don't have it open right now, but will in a few months. You may be listening to this at any time. So maybe when you're listening, it's open. But that you can find that at happinessbeyondheadaches.com and get more information if you are someone that has suffered for a long time and just would like to have the roadmap, have the guidance, have me walk you through and get rid of them and
Right.
need a direction. That's another place. And another thing is I actually just started my own podcast called A Little Bit Healthier. It just launched.
Nice.
Yes, and in that we're talking about things that you can do every day in your life just to live a little bit healthier, because I think we often also think that we need that doctor, we need that person to tell us how to live healthier, and we have so much power in ourselves. So I want people to know
Mhm.
there's things you can do every day to be healthier and live a more fulfilled life.
That's awesome. And we'll link to all of it in the show notes. So your new podcast, your medicine or your headache program, and then also the download that they can get just to get started. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it because for myself, I wished I'd known you 20 years ago, but as somebody who has been through this, I'm so, so grateful that you're here to help people because it's such a big piece, such a big stressor in life.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, and I will see you again.
Have a great day.